Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to the inaugural Texas Sports Hall of Fame Sports Book Festival. My name's Kim Gorham and I'm a volunteer here at the Hall, and I'm here to introduce Jim Reeves, who should need no introduction if you're either from the Dallas area or you're a big follower of sports sections in Texas papers or talk radio. But Jim retired in 2009 after 40 years as an award-winning sports columnist and mostly baseball writer at the Star-Telegram. After retirement, he spent a year writing columns for ESPN and has since been a freelance journalist and author. His new book is called Dallas Cowboys, Legends of America's Team, which is now in its fourth printing. Jim is an honorary member of the Texas Baseball Hall of Fame, and he is a finalist for the second straight year for the J.G. Taylor Spink Award for meritorious contributions to baseball writing. And that carries with it induction into the National Baseball Hall of Fame at Cooperstown. So, huge honor, and it's a huge honor for him to be with us today. Jim was also nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in 1987 for his coverage of the sale of the Rangers to a group headed by future President George W. Bush. He was presented the TCU Bob Schieffer School of Journalism National Ethics Award in 2007, the first and only sports writer to receive that honor. And in 2005, he had the distinction of finishing first, second, and third in the sports commentary competition as judged by the Houston Press Club. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. I want to echo Kim and thank all of you for being here today. It's great to see that there are still people interested in the written word, and that you don't get everything from social media or Twitter or television or whatever. And I urge you, if you are a newspaper reader, please continue. The newspaper business needs your support like it never has before. And I certainly would hate to see a time when newspapers don't play a major part in our lives. As Kim told you, I retired from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram after 40 years. Went to work there in 1969, covering high school sports, West Texas, football, Abilene, Big Spring, Brownwood, all of that area. Worked my way up by 1975 to becoming the Texas Rangers beat writer. Saw a lot of bad baseball in those years. Covered a lot of colorful characters, from Ted Williams to Billy Martin and Whitey Herzog and on and on. I'm sure you're familiar with most of them. My timing couldn't have been worse when I retired in 2009 after 35 years of following the Rangers. They went to the World Series in 2010. So I, fortunately, as Kim mentioned, ESPN had hired me to do some part-time do some columnist for ESPNDallas.com, and they sent me to the World Series. So in all, I've covered 29 World Series in my career. I've had an incredible, I'm a kid from Carlsbad, New Mexico, who at 15 years old was dreaming about covering major sporting events from press boxes in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles, and somehow that dream came true. And after I retired, a few years after that, and just about a year and a half ago, an old colleague of mine named Barry Schlachter from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, who had started his own small publishing business, called me and asked me if I would consider doing a book on the Cowboys. And my response to him, I turned and as I was talking to him, and I looked at my bookshelf behind me, and I said, Barry, I'm looking at about 12 to 15 books on the Cowboys. You sure we need another book on the Cowboys? And he said, well, I want to have one from my publishing company, and I want to hear your insights from when you covered the team through the Jimmy Johnson years in the 1990s. So I agreed to do the book, took on the project. We brought it out last September. Our fifth printing will be out in just a few weeks. We've done an updated chapter in that printing that will include the 2016 season with all the drama with Dak Prescott and Tony Romo. So this has been fun. I didn't know, number one, if I could commit myself to a project of writing a book, and that was kind of a challenge to me, and I'm happy to say we got it done. We organized this book to make this kind of a light history, Cowboys 101, if you will. We didn't have the space. We weren't going to write an 800-page book, which is probably what it. In fact, Peter Golenbach has done that with a definitive history of the Cowboys way back in the early 2000s. That's not what our aim was. This is not the definitive history of the Cowboys. But we try to hit on all the high points and bring out some things in this book that I think you'll enjoy. And we organized it by talking about the personalities and the people who built the Cowboys, the architects, if you will, the Clint Murkisons and Tex Schramm's and Gil Brandt's and Tom Landry's. We kind of focused on the individual stars that have made the impact on the team, the most impact. Mostly through the offensive years, the offensive side of the ball, but we also, of course, get into the doomsday defense and the great Mel Renfro out here and what those people did to make the Cowboys great. And if you look at the NFL Hall of Fame, you'll see that those Cowboys are in the Hall of Fame, especially the defensive side of the ball. They come from that era. And the offensive line, by the way, but they come from that 70s era when the Cowboys were winning Super Bowls and playing in 5 Super Bowls in the 70s. And they come from the 90s era when the Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls and just missed going to a 4th in 1994. So clearly, it's an emphasis on what you contribute to a championship team. There are also some chapters in here on the championship games the Cowboys have played through the years, the impactful games like the Ice Bowl, which was probably the greatest game in NFL history, the catch when the Cowboys got beat by the 49ers and Dwight Clark, the Hail Mary in Minnesota when Staubach and Drew Pearson were able to beat the Vikings, at the very end of the game. So there's a lot of fun parts in here, and then I get into some of the, like I said, into the 90s when I was covering the team as a columnist and following the team extensively. And I have interviews in here with Troy Aikman and Darryl Johnston and many of the Cowboys from that era that I think you will enjoy, and some insights especially into the 95 season. Do people in here, you remember the controversy of the 95 season with the Cowboys? I think you probably will if you're big Cowboy fans. And I get into that pretty much in here. I was fortunate enough in 1995 to be close to the team. And of course, you'll remember that Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones had their little spat and wound up divorcing. And the kids were all upset, of course, that being the players and everybody. I remember remember Jerry Jones' blow up down in Orlando at the NFL meetings where he said, any of a million coaches could coach this team, which led to the breakup, of course. He was very upset, and he mentioned, I could go out and hire Barry Switzer. I was at Rangers spring training at the time down in Port Charlotte, Florida, and drove up the next morning to Orlando to talk to Jerry about these things that he had said the night before, and I was able to meet with him one-on-one in his suite there at the hotel, and I asked him, Jerry, you're not serious about hiring Barry Switzer, are you? And maybe there's some Barry Switzer fans in here, but I had a feeling that was not going to be something that was going to work out best for the Cowboys, and he said, why not? And by gosh, he did go and hire Barry Switzer to be the coach of the Cowboys. And there are a lot of people that will argue that the Cowboys should have won another championship, another Super Bowl in '94. They had a great team. You may remember, and there's a chapter on it in here, the great '94 playoff game out at Candlestick Park where the Cowboys fell behind by 3 touchdowns early, and then Aikman and Urban and Emmett and the crew had a tremendous comeback that fell just short, and the loss to the 49ers. Troy Aikman thought that was the pinnacle game of his career, not just personally, but the game that he pointed to most as a Dallas Cowboy. He thought it was so important, the comeback that they made in that game, even though they fell short in the mud and the muck of Candlestick Park that day, that he used a photo of himself, his back of his jersey, as he walked off the field, and he's got mud smeared all over him. He used that as the front piece of his invitation to people that he wanted to invite to his induction to the Hall of Fame. That's how important he thought that game was. So 95 was just a unbelievably difficult season for the Cowboys. Things fell their way at the end of the season. Things broke right, the right teams lost. The Cowboys came through on a couple of wins when they had to, but they only went 2-2 in December. They were really struggling. What a lot of us who were covering the team didn't realize was what was going on internally. We knew there was something happening with the team in that difficult season, but we were having all of us as reporters and writers, the beat writers, some of the beat writers really had a better look at it than of course the columnists who aren't out there every day. But as reporters, sometimes